And that's why I quit, because I didn't love it anymore. And this is something we have to understand with the differences between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. It deludes you to try and think, oh, if I achieve X, then I will all of a sudden be loved by people, and then consequently I will be happy. And the truth is that really isn't the case. Prioritize what you love. Prioritize what makes you happy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rob Talks podcast. And this is episode 9. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. I now have a new background, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, whether it's actually quite distracting, whether you quite like it. And I mean, look, you've got a little me up in the top corner, you've got all my socials, you can see the name of the podcast and everything. Just let me know what you think. I'm trying it out. Maybe it's better than seeing the background of my student accommodation, potentially. But anyways, let's get straight into this podcast episode. And this episode for me is an incredibly important one, as we're going to be covering some really important topics. So the first topic is around intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, which we'll delve into very soon. The second topic is all around to do with something I learned from Stephen Bartlett about how your insecurities that you actually have as a child can be your drivers for when you are older. We will unpack that in a bit as well. And the final topic for today's episode is all about prioritization. Prioritization within every single aspect of the different things that happen within your life. But first and foremost, the first topic that I'm going to be covering today is all about intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Now, I think this is a really important topic because it's something that we don't always think about, and it's something that we don't really always have the awareness to understand when we are actually intrinsically motivated by something or whether we are extrinsically motivated by something. So first and foremost, let me explain what those words mean. So extrinsic, as I have written in my notes, is when someone is motivated to perform an activity to earn a reward or to avoid punishment. So it's about an external factor that is forcing you to do X activity or X thing. Whilst with intrinsic motivation is where someone is motivated to perform an activity for its own sake or for personal reward. And a lot of the time that can be described as when someone just loves what they do. They just enjoy it because it's just the way it is. And so I thought probably the best way to also explain this further is to talk about an example I've had in my own life. Now, previously on the podcast, I've spoken about my journey within archery and what has happened to me with my journey with archery when I was younger. Basically, when I was about 14 or 15 years old, I had been doing lots of archery at these kind of fairs that you go to and having a go. And I was really begging my mum, being like, I love this sport. Like, this looks so cool. Please, can I do it properly? And so eventually, after a lot of nagging, my mum let me do the sport properly. I had my own bow, I had my own arrows and everything. And I would go down to the club every single weekend to just practice doing archery for hours and hours and hours. And eventually, I got lucky enough to be put on a personal development course, essentially, that was as part of Team GB. So this was aiming to try and find the best archers, essentially, in Great Britain who would help to represent Great Britain at the Tokyo Olympics that have just happened, but also potentially the Paris Olympics that are coming up, I believe, or it may be Beijing, I don't know. But the most recent Olympics that we are going through at the moment. And I was so excited because as me and my brother started to progress, we felt like we were doing well. But as time went on, we didn't get the time to complete all the exercises, and we weren't motivated to do all of the exercises that we needed to do to strengthen our core or to strengthen our back. And we just really didn't have the same motivation as we did originally to go down to the club every weekend, and you had to do something like shoot 100 arrows a day or something crazy like that. And so eventually we were axed from the team and we weren't allowed to participate any further. And within a few months of that happening, I did one more competition within archery in my club and then quit. And for ages, I didn't know why. I didn't understand why did I quit something that I was enjoying so much, something that I thought I was going to pursue so much as a passion that I would actually go to the Olympics. And I honestly think it is because of this fact about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So what happened was that when I started archery, I had an intrinsic motivation because I personally loved it. I loved the idea of just being able to have this cool sport that I can do on the weekend that I'm pretty good at because I'm someone that's good with accuracy in sports. I've always found that. And I just loved it. And I could have just done it every single week for the rest of my life. I absolutely. What started to happen that ruined my intrinsic motivation was that extrinsic motivators came into it. So to try and get me to love the sport even more, supposedly, I all of a sudden was set these goals of that you need to do so many exercises, you need to shoot so many arrows, and if you don't do that, then you will never go to the Olympics, you will never win a gold medal. And all of a sudden, the motivators that I had for archery started to become extrinsic and out of really why I fell in love with the sport. And that's why I quit, because I didn't love it anymore. And this is something we have to understand with the differences between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic motivators means that you just love to do what you do for the personal reward that you get from it. With extrinsic motivation, it's because of something external, a different factor. And the problem with external motivation is that it can ruin your intrinsic motivators that you originally had. And this can really impact us in terms of to the point of where you want to quit. You don't want to do the thing that you used to love to do anymore. And that, unfortunately, is the sad reality of what can happen when we don't realize when we're being intrinsically motivated or when we're being extrinsically motivated. But this is also another problem in that a lot of the time this then means that extrinsic motivation gets a bad rap. It gets this negative light put against it. But in fact, extrinsic motivation can help us to get through certain things in our lives. So for example, when I was revising it for my GCSEs and for my A levels, I decided to set up a form of extrinsic motivation for the subjects that I didn't like maths, like English, science. I really struggled with them. So I had to set myself something that would be an extrinsic motivator because I didn't love what I was doing. And so the extrinsic motivation I would have for myself is something as simple as if you complete X amount of revision for today, you get a chocolate bar. If you complete X amount of revision within this hour, Rob, you get to have a cup of tea. Or if you do X percentage well on this test, then you get some kind of reward to go on a run or go play football. I started to use extrinsic motivation to get me through the tougher things and the things that I don't intrinsically love. And I think this is something that we have to understand. And I've started to really understand, reflecting back on my own life and through my own educational journey, is that something that's really important within education is that there are so many kids and so many students that feel like they struggle with school and that they can't get through school and that they don't love school and there's nothing good to do there. Or even at university, this happens. And a lot of the time, it's because you've put an extrinsic motivator to something, and it's because it feels like you have to do it. You have to go to university. You have to do XYZ to become XYZ person. It's put upon you by society. It's put upon you by parents, by members of your family, by friends, whoever it may be. And the key thing is with those people that are nagging you in your ear or society telling you that this is the way things are done, this is the way that you should be doing them, it's all extrinsic. It's all external. And they may not be the motivators for you, they may in some situations force you to do what you do now. And if you honestly sit there and think, I don't actually love what I do, and I feel like it's been forced upon me by something external, then for one, it's really good that you've noticed that and that you've realized that. But two, you then got to think of, what is the action that I'm going to take? Is there a way that I can still do what I'm doing right now, but find a way that I have more control and I actually love what I am doing, so I can have intrinsic motivation to get up every day and do what I want to do? Or even in some people's cases, and this is not me giving advice, this is me suggesting what some people may be going through and what you may be thinking. But there are some cases of where people do it even within their careers. They quit jobs because they realize that they're not intrinsically motivated to do that job. They're not intrinsically motivated for the outcomes that happen because of that job. They don't feel the personal reward that they feel like they should feel. And so just take the time to understand within mainly your career it is, but also within your sports, your hobbies, your passions, whatever it may be. Work out, are you extrinsically motivated to do this? Or are you intrinsically motivated to do this? And if there was any advice to do with this, I would say you should lean more towards your passions. You should lean more towards the things that you are intrinsically motivated to do, because you will love doing them and you'll get so much passion out of them and you'll get so much personal reward, which will feel better than any $1,000,000 you may earn, or any car that you may be able to buy, or any kind of thing that doesn't motivate you anyway, or doesn't make your life happier. And then use extrinsic motivators to get you through the tougher things. If you're forced to, that you may be doing something that you love, but there's one little thing that you don't like, then use that extrinsic motivator that you can think of that works for you to get through those tougher times. And I absolutely love thinking about that topic. And I really hope that that helps some of you out there in terms of working out whether you actually intrinsically love what you do, or whether it is extrinsic factors or motivators. But the second topic is all to do with something that someone I look up to. I admire as a kind of, maybe not as a role model, but some of the things that he talks about I always find so provoking and so interesting. And his name is Stephen Bartlett. I'm sure I have probably mentioned him before on this podcast, and I've mentioned him so many times to my close friendship group because he's just a cool guy. And one of the things that he speaks about in his book is this thing to do with a lot of the time, the insecurities that we have when we are younger and when we are a child actually become our motivators and our drivers for when we're older. And I'll explain this further. So for him, one of the things that happened as an insecurity was the fact that he didn't have much money and he lived within a family that wasn't, shall we say, well off. And so because of that insecurity as a child of not being able to have the things that he wanted, or not being able to go on holiday and even things like that, it then became the driver for himself in the future to earn a lot of money, because he thought that by earning a lot of money, he would then have the life that he wanted. He would have the life that would make him happy. And so that's why it's really important to understand whether those insecurities we have when we are younger are actually driving us to do some of the things that we do today. Because consequently now Steve realized that it wasn't the money that makes him happy. It was so much more to do with the purpose of the work that he does, the lives that he's changing, the people that he's helping. That's what makes him happy. No amount of money can do that. No possessions that he has can do that. And so we have to realize this. And I think it's something I've been thinking about myself. And I won't share everything because some insecurities that you have can be really private, and that's okay. But I find to journal about them, to write them down, and to think about them, and to be aware about what those may be, can really shape you for who you want to be in the future. So something that may be a kind of insecurity for me is that from when I was younger, from when I've been bullied, for example, or from where I've kind of been seen as the weird kid, the kid that you don't want to talk to. I think consequently, because of those insecurities and the low self-confidence that that has given me when I was younger, sometimes the driver that I have into the future is that I don't want to be that kid anymore, and that I want to be more of the popular person, and I want to be more of the person that people look up to, people admire. And so sometimes that can delude myself, and I'm sure it deludes others out there who may have a similar insecurities when you were younger. It deludes you to try and think, oh, if I achieve X, then I will all of a sudden be loved by people, and then consequently I will be happy. And the truth is that that really isn't the case. It doesn't matter how popular I become. It doesn't matter how famous I become. It doesn't matter how many people I make laugh, how many people I feel like I've really affected or anything like that. Because so many of those moments, unfortunately, just as the way of life is, are moments of joy. Moments of where you get that bit of attention, moments of where you get that adoration, and you think it's everything, but it's not. As I talked about in the previous episode on this podcast, it's a moment of joy. It feels great, but it is fleeting. It goes away, and then you feel empty again. And so next thing you know, you want to get the next best thing. You want to go from 1,000 followers to 100,000 followers. You want to go from earning £100,000 a year to 500,000 to £1 million a year. And you forever raise the bar higher and higher and higher. And that's where there is this crossover between that it can be extrinsic motivators of society, of your family, of people that may be around you. But it also can be insecurities that you felt when you were younger, or that you felt as a child. So my advice with this and my thoughts around this has been that really we just need to make sure that we understand when that is happening, and understand that in the majority of cases, no matter how much you're willing or you're hoping that that kind of thing you achieve in the future, that vision that you have, that will never fulfill that insecurity that you had as a child. By being poor when you were younger, it doesn't matter how much more money you get when you're in the future, it won't ultimately make you happier. It won't ultimately fulfill the value that you need to have for your life and the quality of life that you deserve. And so consequently, this is why we have to think about, what are the things I actually truly love? Why am I doing things because I actually really enjoy them? And it puts me in a flow state of happiness and enjoyment that I can have pretty much infinitely in so many cases. And this also makes me think about a point that I actually heard on one of Stephen Bartlett's podcasts. The founder of Moonpig, Nick Jenkins, said it beautifully in terms of talking about of how some of the things that we do, some of the passions that we have in our lives, are driven by both our angels and our demons. The great things that have happened in our lives and that we love to do, that's why we pursue them, but also the horrible things that have happened in our lives, and that's why we pursue them. And we need to make sure that we identify when that is happening and why that is happening. And to be honest, there can be cases of where it's valid, it makes sense. Like, I do this podcast because of the problems I've had with my own mental health, with my own mental well-being, and some of the scary things I've been through in my life, which, as I always say, I will talk about in the future more. And that's why I do this podcast. I do this podcast, I run this YouTube channel because of some of the demons that I have, but also because of some of the passions I have. I'm really passionate about psychology and understanding people and understanding why we do certain things, or how mental health, how we can look after our mental health, how we can look after our mental well-being, and all these different things. So we need to make sure that we, for one, have the awareness to understand when we are being driven by our insecurities, but also to understand and ask the question, is this toxic for my life? Is this actually what's going to make me happy? Or even right now, is it going to make me happy for who I am right now? And that's why I think it's just a massive thing to consider within your own life and to identify and have the self-awareness to understand within your own life. And the final topic for today's podcast, and I apologize if it has felt like a heavy hitting podcast, but these topics are so incredibly important to me. And I think this last topic, I think, is also incredibly important around the idea of prioritization. Now, I want to speak about this because I've even seen it within the last few weeks on LinkedIn and talking to people that we always think about prioritization in terms of time management, and we think about it as a way to be more effective, to be more efficient within our lives so that we get more things done. We actually use our time effectively. But I think there's another angle of prioritization that we don't always think about that kind of comes into the equation of our life work balance. And that is thinking about what are truly the things that I want to prioritize right now? What even are the things that you want to prioritize for 2022? What are those? And is it aspects within your career? Is it things that you want to fulfill, goals that you want to go after, targets that you're aiming for? But also, more importantly, I think, than just the bubble of career that we sometimes sit within, what are you going to prioritize for yourself? What are you going to prioritize that's going to make yourself feel better, make yourself be happier, make yourself enjoy life more? And also, what are the things that will contribute to your happiness? That can be things like being with your friends, being with your family. What are you going to prioritize within them? And what actions are you going to take to show that you are prioritizing them? Is it that you're going to have a call with your friends or meet up with your friends once a week? Is it that you're going to do that with family members? Is it that if it's within your career that you're going to practice a skill and you're going to try and do that skill every single week, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, that you're just going to practice because you know that you want to get better in that area of your career? Or is it that for your personal self, that you're going to allow yourself to meditate for 10 minutes every day so that you feel calm and more relaxed and ready for the day ahead? Is it that you're going to start journaling? Is it that you're going to adopt positive habits that can help you to be happier and feel more like your authentic self? Whatever those things may be, we just need to remember and we need to make sure that we prioritize them. Don't let yourself be pulled by things that others may be saying. Don't let yourself be pulled by, as I've said already in this episode, those extrinsic things that may pull you away from actually what you want to prioritize. Because this happens so much. And we see this massively within this area of like time management, and especially I see it within the entrepreneurial world, of where we start to think that we need to be more effective with our time. We need to consequently then take the action to focus more on our career, on building our business, on our personal development of our skills and stuff like that. But then that takes away your time with friends. That takes away your time that you could spend with your family. That takes away so much time that is precious to us for things that I honestly think in most cases are more important and are in fact things that we love. We love our family. We love our friends. And there may be aspects within your career that you love as well. But I think it's something that we need to make sure that we prioritize. Prioritize what you love. Prioritize what makes you happy. And ultimately, that I feel is the only way that we can live authentically our best life and a life that feels fulfilled. So if there is anything that you take away from this podcast episode, I think it should be this. Work out what you love. Work out what you love to do. Work out what is important for you in your life, truly, authentically important for you in your life. And consequently, I think you'll be even happier for it, and you will be able to have a great life-work balance. And so that brings us to the end of this podcast episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And I will see you next Monday for episode 10.
You have just been listening to the Rob Talks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and please make sure to subscribe and give me a follow on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, or even LinkedIn. And I will speak with you soon. Stay safe and have a great week.